So before I get into the collapsing Russia stories today, of which I have quite a lot today, I wanted to give you sort of a sense of place and information space. On this corner about 2.5 years ago, Russians targeted this place with some cruise missiles from about 700 miles away, killing many people. Even a lot of the people walking here don't even know about it. But I mean, a friend of mine was banned from Twitter for taking photographs and posting them of the still smoldering bodies, just to let the world know what was happening. And now, I mean, years ago, and now this has happened, in thousands of places all over this country, dozens and dozens of places just in this city within a kilometer or two from where I'm standing. But I wanted to open today with this, just to tie it back to, there was a lot of crying wolf about the collapsing Russian economy, collapsing Russian world. And now that we really have it, it's not being covered as well as it should, and it's the reason that I started this channel. Today we have Nicolas Maduro, one of Putin's pet projects. Now the U.S. increasing the reward for double the amount that was offered for the capture of bin Laden, the man that killed 3,000 people in New York City. So the U.S. putting Venezuelan dictator Maduro on par with bin Laden is not good news for the Kremlin. If you remember, in May of 2018, Maduro lost the election, and he did what all Russian-backed dictators do. He called Putin, and Putin sent in Wagner mercenaries. The Venezuelan national oil companies relocated their headquarters to Moscow. The Russians took control of the propaganda apparatus, the domestic propaganda apparatus, to commit all sorts of psychological warfare on the local population. Putin sent some long-range strategic bombers. The headline, of course, that the West ran with, nuclear bombers, and then all of a sudden they're, oh no, we better let Russia do whatever they want. They came in and took control, and it was about $850 million in Venezuelan central bank gold reserves were carried off to Moscow. Things did what they always do, but see, that was before Ukraine. They could get away with those things. So let's look at what happened. Why this is so bad for the Kremlin, and it signals it's a symptom of the overall retreat of Russian power globally. What happened when the similar situation happened just back in November when Assad fell? You remember that? What happened was he called Putin, and Putin was like, dude, you're on your own. You can handle this. And he didn't handle it. And of course, Turkey took advantage of, to try to bring some civility to that country, to get the Russians out. I mean, this was a dictatorship that was backed for decades by Russia. It wasn't just Assad, it was Assad's father before him. USSR backed him, Putin backed him. I mean, this is an outpost of Russia. This is a Russian-backed colony. Now let's look at more symptoms. We had Moldova. The Russians spent 200-something million trying to sway the Moldovan elections just, 7 months ago, just after this whole thing happened with Assad. It didn't work. Pro-Europeans won Moldovan election. They tried everything in the book, massive criminality, to try to sway that election in Moldova. A month later, the same thing happened in Romania. It didn't work. Once again, it didn't work. The pro-EU candidate won. They had TikTok campaigns, bribing. They found houses full of weapons. They had a plan in order to, if the election swaying didn't work, to violently overthrow the government in Bucharest. They arrested hundreds of people in Romania, and this was all one big Russian effort to overthrow an EU country. This is what Russia does, but it's no longer working because all available resources are tied up in Ukraine. So watching Venezuelan dictator Maduro today, now on level in the eyes of the West of bin Laden, means that the West will get their way with Venezuela, the largest oil reserves in the world. This is not a good thing for the Kremlin. A series of horrible catastrophes if you're looking at the world from the Kremlin. Now let's get into the economic catastrophe. Let's start with the budget deficit news yesterday. Russian budget deficit came out Yeah, a budget deficit of $15 billion in one single month. Remember, the Russian economy is 5%. Look at the chart. 5% the size of the US economy. Yes, on the internet, I know you can't type in anything, you can't post anything on social media without 5 Kremlin troll farm employees telling you that Putin's on a horse and he's galloping off into the sunset and he's going to fix everything, going to bring us into this new Christian conservative world. Okay, yeah, great. But in the real world, their economy is nothing, okay? And this chart is just a great one to show your friends. Russian economy is not what you read about on the internet. So losing $15 billion in a single month, yeah, it's just one more catastrophe. In June, they lost $3.4 billion. This used to be a budget surplus country. And that surplus was going into planned military operations and propaganda projects and, swaying elections and all the nefarious things that Russia is usually up to. So what's happening is that the real economy is dying, so therefore tax revenue is dying. If there's no economy, you can't tax it. And so if you look here at the Treasury's accounts, these are the accounts that hold the taxpayers, companies, individuals pay taxes. It goes into these accounts. You can see that we are now at the lowest point of the year. Each month is getting worse and worse. We're now at about 50% of what it was in January. Cash comes into the accounts around the first of the month. The accounts hit the highest, and then they head down until around the 20th, and then they start heading up as tax receipts are received into the accounts. So you can see this month is going to be the worst of the year easily, and it's only getting worse. It's a 400% increase in the budget deficit year over year. Expenses are up 20% year over year, and income is just dying. Just the gas and oil tax receipts is down 40% year over year. For the year, we've got a $62.5 billion budget deficit. Remember, this economy is only $1.8 trillion. This is an accelerating trend. It's getting worse and worse. So now let's skip over to the National Welfare Fund, which is some awesome news. But I need to explain some things to you. It's very interesting. So this is the National Welfare Fund. These are the public numbers of the National Welfare Fund. As you can see, there's a blue line there. And that blue line is what is referred to as the liquid portion of the fund. The liquid portion of the fund is now, since there's no dollars or legitimate currencies in there, euros, it's comprised mainly of yuan and gold. And as you can see, the public numbers on this, it was at about 155 billion just before the war, and it's down to 45 billion today. 45 billion. Okay, but let me tell you where the smoke and mirrors comes in here, okay? So whether or not that number is true. Now let's skip over to the illiquid part. The illiquid part is the other line, which is only increasing, right? So they tell the Russian population, look, our sovereign wealth fund, it's just amazing. Everything's great. Everything's there. Put the pitchforks away, stay at home, get this bottle of vodka, get hammered, and everything's going to be cool. Don't worry. Okay, but you see, let me tell you what illiquid means in terms of the National Welfare Fund. To give you an idea of some of the garbage that's in it. So you remember back in 2013, as there were riots in the streets in Kyiv, December 17th, in Kyiv, all over Ukraine, there were protests. The Russian puppet Yanukovych was still in power for another month or so. He went to Russia and he said, hey, buy 15 billion in Ukrainian sovereign bonds. So the Russians said, okay, cool. And so $15 billion transaction happened. Viktor Yanukovych apparently stole most of that money. And so then Maidan happened and the Russian puppet flew off to Moscow. That $15 billion in long ago defaulted bonds were defaulted on in 2015. Those bonds are still being valued at par value, 15 billion, in the Russian National Welfare Fund. Okay, and it's pieces of companies that are now out of business, just absolute garbage, and they're just accumulating and accumulating. So you remember last week when I explained to you what the banks are doing. The banks are no longer lending to the population. Mortgage issuance is down 60%. Lending to corporations is down 89%, lending to small and medium businesses is down 59%. So, but what are the Russian banks doing? Well, the Russian banks are now buying Russian sovereign bonds. It's 300-something% increase of issuance of Russian sovereign bonds year over year. The banks are no longer lending into the economy, but they are buying the Russian sovereign bonds. And those sovereign bonds are sold, and the Russian government then takes that cash and they build North Korean weapons factories and slam ballistic missiles into apartment buildings. It's pure capital destruction. So the National Welfare Fund is going to end up with worthless garbage, and the banks are going to end up with worthless garbage. So now let's skip over to the gasoline crisis in Russia. Prices only accelerating. Today, another record high. Yesterday, another record high. Day before, another record high. Non-stop record highs, despite the Russian government banning exports. We have a situation where now Russian Telegram is filled with people complaining that they can no longer make ends meet, with companies now switching to a 4-day work week rather than just committing to mass layoffs per Kremlin dictate. We have things only getting worse for the average Russians that had yet to feel the effects of this war. We have Semros, the largest cement producer in Russia, coming out with horrendous earnings and projections for future quarters. Not only that, saying that they're also moving down to a 4-day work week. They're cutting 20% of all salaries. Things are only getting worse and worse and worse. That's the update for today. Yeah, let's hope for the worst. What's bearish for Russia is bullish for humanity. Have a good day.